Let me call to order the special council meeting Tuesday, September 15th, 2:30 p.m. in council chambers. I want to welcome everybody here. This is a special meeting without our normal opening procedures, but in light of the loss to our community of Captain Wayne Magwood on Friday, I would like to start with a moment of silent remembrance for him, which I will end at the appropriate time. Amen. Item number 2 is public comment. We would ask if you have a public comment to please come forward. Give your name and address. We need to know the municipality in which you live. I think everybody knows the rules. There are no outbursts. There's no cheering. There's no jeering. Let's keep the decorum so that everyone has a chance to speak and be heard. And if not, Chief Ritchie, when you see Chief Ritchie stand up, you know things are not going as they should. So there's a 2-minute timer right here. Did we hand out numbers or are people just going?
Yes, sir, we have numbers, and
Okay.
I'm prepared to start, if that's okay, sir.
All right.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, initially, we'll call up 2 speakers. We're starting with D10, and if D11 could wait on deck, that would be great. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Hi, my name is Carmen Nash, 1230 Gannett Road, Mount Pleasant. As I mentioned when I spoke to council on September 8th, the WHO and CDC have disclosed some of the potential risks for wearing masks. Perhaps the medical professionals you have consulted with during this ordinance process have mentioned possible risks to you. I'm not sure, but I do know that the possible risks are not listed in the proposed temporary ordinance. Informed consent is a process for getting permission and the knowledge of the possible consequences before conducting a healthcare intervention on a person. Wearing a mask is a healthcare intervention. By requiring people to wear a mask to enter businesses and to work, you have unequivocally introduced the need for informed consent in this medical intervention. If you rely on the medical advice of professionals who do not provide you with the possible consequences, and then you do not inform the citizens of those consequences, you are not allowing the opportunity for informed consent. A partial list of potential harms from the WHO dated June 5th. Increased risk of self-contamination, headache and or breathing difficulties, development of facial skin lesions, difficulty with communicating clearly, a false sense of security, difficulty wearing them for those with asthma, chronic respiratory or breathing problems, and those living in hot and humid environments. You may be putting the town of Mount Pleasant at risk for being liable if someone is harmed while wearing a mask in the ways described in this ordinance because you have not provided a process for informed consent. It is called the breath of God for a reason. Job 33:4 says, "The Spirit of God has made me, and the breath of the Almighty gives me life." And I think everyone's breath and their very life deserves the process of informed consent. I recommend that you amend the proposed temporary ordinance to include potential risks. Thank you.
D12.
Thank you. Rima Schresser, 123 Civitas Street, Mount Pleasant. I'm an epidemiologist and I work with the University of Oxford, collaborating closely with WHO on COVID-19. I've also worked with WHO before moving to Charleston. Several residents have questioned the data on the effectiveness of masks in protecting the spread of infection, wrongly interpreting or using old epidemiological data and wrongly citing WHO and CDC. Please rely on the scientists to give you scientific data. Many also think that cases are down, so we should throw all caution to the wind. However, we're about to enter the flu season, and there are already not enough ICU beds at MUSC. Masks are a cheap, cost-effective way to protect against the transmission of COVID-19 by blocking the aerosol particles to pass from person to person. They've been shown to reduce COVID cases by 40 to 60%. And I have my mask down because you're more than 6 feet away. So if anyone picks on that, that's my reasoning. They allow us to keep our businesses and schools open. People that talk about acne, we won't have teachers, we won't have faces to see if the schools are closed. This is not about politics, it's about science and protecting each other in this community that we choose to live in. It's about using the liberty to make responsible choices, including those, protecting those amongst us who are vulnerable. Anyone that challenges you on overstepping your role is wrong. The preamble to the Constitution states that one of the roles of government is to protect the interests of the community, and not requiring masks is a blatant disregard for the welfare of community. Without government intervention, nobody would wear seatbelts, indeed nobody would pay taxes. So I ask you, therefore, to reinstate the ordinance and indeed extend it indefinitely until we as a state are well below the threshold of safe. Thank you.
D13. D12 is next, yes.
My name is Cynthia Nierenblatt, 516 Wilden Street, Mount Pleasant. Since Christianity was brought up at the last meeting, I'll begin with a quote from the Talmud, a theological book of Jewish laws. He who saves one life saves the world. I stand here today asking you to save and protect the lives of all Mount Pleasant residents. Reinstate the public mask ordinance. As the mother of the 15-year-old young man who stated at last week's meeting how he attends school to learn math, science, and history to become a productive citizen, I was floored by certain people in this room and on this council who denied the exact same math, science, and history he has been taught. Presented with peer-reviewed, published, scientific and mathematical facts from medical doctors and epidemiologists whose job is to protect and save our lives, some of you promoted baseless conspiracy theories created by anonymous and unverified users on the internet. You are playing an historically dangerous political game, spouting falsehoods about people and viruses. The truth is, COVID-19 cases and their related deaths are down because of mask-wearing mandates here and the state. Published scientific research has proven COVID-19 is spread through aerosol droplets in our respiratory systems. Wearing masks mitigates the risk of contracting and spreading it. Your fear-based blanket arguments against this mandate are poorly sown with unverified lies. Heal our community, stop the lies, and pass this protective ordinance. As a Jewish person whose family has historically been the victim of false religious conspiracy theories for centuries, I'll end with this. The COVID-19 virus is just as dangerous as the ideological lies. They are both spread very easily, and if not contained, they'll both kill innocent people.
D14.
Mike Novielli, 221 Bayfront Drive, Mount Pleasant. Last week at the town council meeting, during public remarks on the mask ordinance, we heard from both sides of the argument. From those opposed to renewing the ordinance, among other things, we heard about child abductions, Antifa, to infections and rashes caused by wearing masks. We also heard about the science with references to specific studies and data tied to credible sources. From those in favor of masks, we heard such fascinating arguments like, we all know masks work, the evidence is clear, and wearing a cloth on your face is an act of compassion. Most incredibly, however, we were told by some that the science is settled. Really? When was it settled and by whom? Please refer me to the time and date. I must have been asleep when that happened. We also heard from some local healthcare professionals in favor of wearing masks. And with deference to these individuals for their amazing service, none of them are world-class experts on the effectiveness of masks or pandemics. But you know who does have access to these world-class experts? President Trump. And he agrees that while he encourages individuals to wear a mask, he does not believe it should be mandated. And the man he seeks to replace him, Joe Biden, reversed course and recently stated that he too would oppose a mask mandate. So the very two men at the highest levels of our federal government, having access to information that certainly no one in this room does, have stated their opposition to a mask mandate. Therefore, it would be the height of arrogance for the 5 council members, including the mayor, who voted in favor of renewing the ordinance, to do so again in direct opposition to both President Trump and Mr. Biden. I would strongly urge the members of this town council to reconsider and vote no on the mandate. Your votes will be noted and most certainly not forgotten.
D15.
Olga Blanford, 1742 Central Avenue, Sullivan's Island. When it comes to the facts you received about coronavirus from the politician and mainstream media, the only thing that's certain is the fact that we are all being gaslit. With the current epidemic continuing and decreasing pace, LARPing media and desperate attempt to keep life as abnormal as possible. Continue to pretend like it's in April and all America is New York City. We were told 1,000 plus a day are dying, and now we have no idea if it's a coronavirus or actually dying from what killing them, or they just dying with the coronavirus in their system and of old age or whatever commodity they already had. Meanwhile, America masked up like in 1918, pretending it ill-fitting, moist bacteria and virus-laden cloth muzzle are somehow going to abate the spread of virus that's harmless and super mild and the vast majority of those who contact it. This is the quote from one article I took. But let me tell you about myself. I was born in Soviet Union, grew up in Russia, grew up in Soviet Union, grew up in Russia with Putin. So I know manipulation from far, far away. My family lives all around the world, and when people here come to me and ask about Russia, what's going on in Russia, they're not interested in my answer. They already know it because they heard it on TV. So, and we all heard about science, and science is real. What does that mean? And when you present one point of the story, one side of the story in science, it's not a science, it's propaganda. And I find it's really funny standing here, Soviet Russian girl, who telling you about you being manipulated and brainwashed.
Ma'am.
D16.
Good afternoon. My name's Adam Luray, 1728 Battalion Drive. It's not a science question anymore, it's a math question. 99.746 survival rate is a math question, not a science one. Everyone can understand math. If I told you that you had a 99.745% chance of winning the lottery, everyone in this room would jump up out of their seats and go buy a lottery ticket. If somebody told me my mom, she had stage 4 pancreatic cancer, if they told her she had a 99.746% chance of beating it, my family would be jumping up and down. Mr. Rambo, I have a question for you. I checked you out. You have kids. I have kids. I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. I want you to explain to me, when your kids get sick in the mask, and they will, they're going to get some sort of strep, they're going to get some bacteria, some crazy cold that we don't know about yet. I want you to explain to me as a father how you're going to tell your daughter 4 or 5 days after she was sick to put that thing back on, thinking that she's going to trust you. These kids know that these masks make them sick. You paused last time when we voted. That means you have a conscience. You're supposed to protect your kids. Your number one duty, number one, is to protect your kids above your political ambitions, above everything. I'm protecting my kids. I've never worn a mask, neither will my kids ever. They're in school 5 days a week. They have gym twice a week. They go to lunch. They're with their friends. They come home happy. It's out there. It's out there. Life is out there. It's there. You have a duty. We all have a duty to protect these children. If you become a champion for children, you'll get 10,000 more votes than you did this time. If you're known as the guy that protects kids, you'll be a hero. And to whoever put these sick signs up, non-mask wear and mask wear, the next time, put a swastika and a Star of David up. Or put black and white, because that's what it's about. It's not about a virus.
D17.
Tim Keel, 605 Pelsley Drive, Mount Pleasant. How come I always get to go after the guy who yells? Anyway, my wife is a nurse. She works in taking samples for COVID. The patient's masks protect her. Her mask protects me. My mask protects you. That's the ordinance. Thank you.
D18.
Hello, Melissa Munsell, 2751 Christchurch Court in Mount Pleasant. I'm the manager in the emergency department at Roper Mount Pleasant Hospital. I take seriously the responsibility I have to this community to be prepared for your healthcare needs and present you with information to make educated decisions. Over the weekend, Roper St. Francis saw a surge of admissions. From Friday, September 11th until today, Roper St. Francis has experienced a 100% increase in hospitalizations from COVID-19. Over the past 2 weeks, 5% of our tests were positive. In the last week, 6% of our tests were positive. The overall positive rate since COVID testing began is 12%. It cannot be said enough, masks are needed to slow the spread of COVID-19. We all want the same thing, businesses open, kids in school, we want to go to a football game. A slow process will get us there. As a Mount Pleasant resident and a mom to a disabled child, we all have a responsibility to protect the most vulnerable, to protect the children, to protect the elderly, to protect those that are immunocompromised. I am not an expert on masks. I have been wearing them for my 27-year career as an ER nurse. I've never gotten sick from a mask. I don't know anyone who has. Asymptomatic carriers can account for a large proportion of this virus spread, and we are seeing that now. Contact tracing is difficult when that occurs. Councilman O'Rourke, at this meeting last week, you addressed the healthcare community and you asked what we had gained. We have gained knowledge from lessons learned. We know that large gatherings without proper protection measures spreads disease. In April and May, we had gained an upper hand on COVID-19 by flattening the curve. We learned from people speaking in this room last week that there are those who require a mandate to be compliant and keep everyone safe. After Memorial Day, we saw spikes and we saw our hospitals work at capacity. The healthcare providers on the front line gained insight into dying patients' lives. They gained trust from unknown family members that their loved one wasn't dying alone. We have gained your trust as medical professionals, educating with statistics and facts. Roper St. Francis supports and asks the town of Mount Pleasant to support the mask ordinance.
D19.
Can y'all hear me?
Speak in the microphone, please.
Well, let's clean it off.
That's a good idea.
Untouched it. Is there a trash can? Okay, can y'all hear me now? Jackie Klingenberg, Hogan's Alley, Mount Pleasant. Y'all know me. I've been here before, and I'm here again today because I don't believe it's the role of the government to provide medical mandates. Per the WHO, the wide use of masks by healthy people in the community setting is not supported by current evidence and carries uncertainties and critical risk. Cohen Behrens, who's the spokesman for the National Institute for Public Health and Environment, states, face masks in public places are not necessary based on all the current evidence, and there's no benefit and there may be negative impact. So what you're asking us to do is to participate in a science experiment which may be harmful to our health and without informed consent. I believe any decision concerning a person's health and medical advice should be between them and their doctor. There are multiple medical sources, including, but not limited to, Dr. Russell Blaylock, Dr. Michael Gadio, and the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons, that all point to the potential harm to one's health from wearing these masks. They may include, but are not limited to, headaches, increased airway resistance, carbon dioxide accumulation, hypoxia, severe skin rashes, reductions in blood oxygen, and lung infections in people with lung diseases. And I have asked for someone on this panel to provide me any actual randomized clinical studies that will support these mandates. And you know how many I've gotten back? 0. And I know people can come up here and say, well, cases are going down, we're wearing masks. Sweden is almost flat. Denmark, no mask. Mandates, no lockdowns. So I don't see how you can justify it. Thank you.
D20.
I used to teach aerobics. I know how these work. So, I just have a couple things.
Name and address, please.
Oh, Susie Valhalla, 2031 Prospect Hill Drive. I have a couple things to say. It's pretty simple. Do you want to choose a mask to keep everybody safe, or do you want to be responsible for choosing a casket for your friends and neighbors? Thank you.
E1,
Dennis Blythe, 610 Pelzer Drive, Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. After the last town council meeting, myself and another number of other speakers got called out for not sanitizing the area in front of us, and specifically for not sanitizing the microphone. I'd like to point out to those who are unaware that the virus is not transmitted from a microphone to me. I may put the virus on the microphone from speaking toward it, but it will not jump from that microphone to me. I have to touch it. These things that I might touch, which I did not, matter. In addition to that, I did wear a mask the entire time, and I was told that I didn't, which is just not true. And thank you, by the way, for the separation of people here. It's very helpful. Kathy, I can't understand, forgive me, Councilman Landing, I cannot understand how you can ignore the advice of all the medical experts from our local town and the Charleston Regional Business Alliance. They're always very supportive of business. Please support them today. Councilman O'Rourke, you may not be running again next time. You said that one time before, and that's fine. But please do the right thing in this regard, which is to include face masks for us. The Declaration of Independence speaks of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There's a reason life is first. There is no possibility of the pursuit of happiness or liberty without life. I choose to do everything I can to help others to live, and I hope that they will do the same for me. Thank you very much.
E2,
Keith Blanford, 1742 Central Avenue, Sullivan's Island, South Carolina. So some final thoughts, because I can only assume that you just don't understand. The United States is a constitutional republic based on the U.S. Constitution, and this document has always been an obstacle to socialists and communists. They have attempted many ways to circumvent the United States Constitution and are relentless in their attempts to destroy our way of life. Within the last few decades, enemies of the United States have found a glitch in the Constitution, and they now realize that they can take away individual rights by labeling it a public health crisis. This began with the idea of global warming, aka settled science. Individual rights would be removed for the greater good, and all of this would be governed by an international body. Global warming has not worked well, but now we have global warming 2.0, which is known as a virus event. Using the public health system, the Constitution has been successfully subverted, removing individual rights to include, but not limited to, the First and 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. Clearly, there has been no equal protection under the law, as illustrated by the riots. One group can do as they please, while others cannot even go to church, which is the First Amendment and freedom of religion. We are certainly not free to assemble, and I would argue that free speech has been greatly limited by censorship and attempts at bullying. Using a manufactured public crisis, whatever this may be, the enemies of the United States, both domestic and international, can have unlimited power over the individual. What is global warming 3.0? Racism is a public health crisis. When someone is accused of spreading white supremacy, what happens? Do you quarantine them? When they say something that hurts somebody's feelings, do you cover their mouth with a mask? This is terrifying, and it has no end. Until we as a people come together and accept that this is exactly what is happening, then we will continue to watch the systematic destruction of our republic. We must fight back, and everything starts locally. By ending the mask mandate, we can show the people behind the curtain that we see them.
E3,
Good afternoon, Margaret Rodenberg, 808 Post Oak Drive. Happy to be here again. I spoke last week about folks that are suffering in silence, some that I know personally, myself personally sometimes. They're victims of trauma, And they have other issues that can't be spoken about in public because some of it is very private. And the biggest issue for me is the division and the shame and the categorizing of people in this community that we don't deserve. I mean, if you're not wearing a mask, people just assume that you're selfish or you don't care. And for whatever reason someone isn't comfortable wearing one, that's up to them. So I wanted to share this note that I got last night in the mail from a woman I don't know. My daughter handed it to me at 7 o'clock. It says, "Thank you for what you said. I'm going to change her name with my late grandmother just so I can keep her privacy and I don't forget. My late grandmother was an Irish immigrant. The most proud thing she had was her freedom, and she was a very spiritual woman." Her name was Madeline O'Neill, so I'm going to say that instead of this woman's name. "Hi, Margaret. You don't know me, but my name is Madeline O'Neill. I live in Mount Pleasant too, and watch the recordings of you speaking to the Mount Pleasant Council. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for saying what you said. I have prayed every day that God works through us to stop this mask mandate. And I agree with what you said about the mayor getting on Twitter to overturn what the council, and I believe God, decided for us as a town to not have to wear the mask. Great job. I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you, Madeline O'Neill." And I don't say that because I think I'm some great person. All I see from this is division and feeding a mayor's ego. And I've never seen worse leadership than this, and our town deserves better. We all want to take care of each other. It's not about mask or not mask, it's about community. God bless America.
That's all I have signed up, Mayor.
Is there anyone who came to speak who did not get the opportunity? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. One first and then second. Go ahead. Name and address in 2 minutes, please.
Lynn Furlow, 3536 East Higgins. I'm here again to represent the residents and families of South Bay. It's pretty simple to me. I've got geriatric folks, about 200 of them. I have about 500 family members. I have about 200 staff members. All of those are dependent upon the positivity rates of Charleston County coming down. I hear a lot of different numbers thrown around in here. To me, it just boils down to the CDC and DHEC, and the rest of them don't really matter to the people of South Bay. So I'd ask that you would continue the mask ordinance so that number can drop, so they can see their families. That's the most important thing to us every day. So I'd appreciate your support.
My name is Jessica Schmidlap. I live at 1619 Marsh Harbor Lane, Tuller's Cove. And somehow I made it to 50 years old without realizing how many conspiracy theories there are going around our country. I wear a mask because my husband is a doctor. He's an orthodontist who sees between 350 and 400 possibly asymptomatic teenagers a week. So I wear a mask for you. And it's the simplest thing that could be done, and I don't understand why it's so hard.
Does that conclude our speakers, those who want to speak? Thank you. Thank everybody for observing the time limits and for keeping it civil. It's very welcome. I appreciate it. That ends item 2, which is public comment. Item 3 is final reading of a temporary ordinance requiring persons to wear face coverings in certain circumstances in the town of Mount Pleasant to reduce the risk of exposure to COVID-19. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve,
Second.
and we have a second. We are in discussion. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I'll just say I've talked to 3 different doctors. One's a cardiologist, one's internal medicine, one is a very well-respected member of the children's medicine, pediatricians, and all 3 were very strongly in favor of us passing a mask ordinance.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Lanning?
I'm going to try to keep this brief because I had longer remarks last time, and I just want to say that since the time of the presentation last week and our vote last week, and today in our public commentary, we have heard repeatedly things that are simply not correct. There is not a single person on this council that I know of that has said publicly or otherwise that they are against masks. What we have done is voted differently about government's role in this matter. So I'd like to repeat some of the most important things of what I said last week, and that is I started out by saying that the most unfortunate aspect of this mask ordinance debate has been the level of division created within our town over something that has been filled with incorrect information. Even the petition that was signed by, I think, 12, 13, 14,000 people had the very first sentence was completely wrong, that we had ended the ordinance and the fact that we were against masks. None of that was correct. So I'm just going to mention a couple highlights. And in regard to people saying, do you believe the science, do you believe the whatever, we believe the science. I've not heard anybody say anything on this council to the contrary. What we also believe, and I'm not going to speak for everybody, I'm just going to speak for myself now, is that when we passed the mask resolution unanimously at the end of June that went into effect and is still in effect today, it urged businesses and citizens to follow the CDC guidelines that were clearly outlined. It also mentioned specific things for all businesses, not just grocery stores and pharmacies, which is what is covered by the ordinance. That means you are no less safe today than you were 2 weeks ago before the ordinance expired. If you've been out shopping at a grocery store or pharmacy in the last week or two, you may have noticed that the signs are still on the doors. Try getting past the person at the front door of Costco without a mask on. I'm not even sure if they allow the medical exemptions, and our ordinance actually allows for medical exemptions. It is right now incumbent upon businesses to protect their employees, their customers, and their livelihoods, because businesses have figured it out. They've figured out that if they don't have safety valves in place, if they don't disinfect, if they don't require physical distancing, we've all seen the lines on the floor in all the stores, if they don't require masks at the door, a lot of people won't come there and shop. They have figured it out for themselves. And no ordinance that in 60 days did not issue a single citation. Why? Because we have one code enforcement officer for 92,000 people. And if you want to say, well, you ought to have more. If you have an ordinance, you ought to have more. I brought this up last week. We don't want to ask our police and our fire department personnel, as they're doing in other communities nearby, to come off of the critical work that they're already doing to protect us in order to give people citations for not having a mask on in a store. So we are letting the businesses who are already doing it make those great decisions for their own business model. And by the way, if you don't think that's enough to cause businesses to want to do what is perceived to be the safest thing, then how about check a little bit about the liability right now? There's a tremendous liability on the part of businesses that if someone can not necessarily prove they caught it when they were in a certain location, but simply show a level of negligence. Hey, I went to such and such grocery store and I saw 50 people without masks, and that's the only place I've been in public, and now I'm sick and in the hospital. If that happens, that business could be held liable. And I hate to even bring that up because I hate that kind of law. I don't think that's the right way to enforce things, but that's the truth. So this is not about being against the medical people. It's not about being against businesses, quite the opposite. I actually personally have 35 years of business experience, which is why I have a different perspective than a lot of other people on council. And I haven't just gone to websites, I haven't just called, I've talked to many business owners and I've talked to many home offices. We, town council at Mount Pleasant, are not the sole arbiters of what's right and wrong. And in this situation right now, people have figured this out, they're doing it the right way. And I believe an unending ordinance is not the right way to go. But again, I am not against masks. I've been wearing one since the beginning of this. I've been wearing one during the entire time of, except for when I'm speaking in public. And I am going to continue to do so whether this ordinance passes or not, which it will probably pass today. I just think it's wrong for people to believe that we handled this the right way. One last comment, and I did make this last week. I said I was going to keep it short, and I haven't. Sorry about that. One last comment. We knew this emergency ordinance, which came about right after a big spike in the numbers in the Low Country, we knew it was going to expire August 31st. Why didn't the Police, Judicial, and Legal Committee, chaired by our mayor, why didn't they discuss this in the August regular committee meeting? If they had addressed the fact that this was going to be expiring, and they said, you know, we don't know what's going to happen yet, so let's wait, we could have still passed an ordinance for the future expiration of the emergency. And then in the council meeting, it could have gone to the council, it could have been voted on, we could have had a second reading. We had many special council meetings in the month of August. I believe the reason it wasn't handled that way was poor prior planning. Poor prior planning in this case means that we've had many people scared for the last 2 weeks since this ordinance expired. We didn't need to have anybody be scared. If it scares you not to have an ordinance from the town, then you have one person to blame for that, because it could have been handled completely differently. The division that we've had created by this is more than anything I've seen since I've been on council, and it's sad, because again, there's not a single person sitting up here who is against masks. So the bottom line to this is, when you think about how we protect as a town, remember that every one of us wants to protect our citizens, and you are no less safe today than you were 2 weeks ago. And you'll be no more safe tomorrow if this ordinance passes today. But think about how things are done. Would you rather have governance that shows caring and prior planning, or would you rather have things that are all about fear and all about division and creating dissension? Bottom line is, I have been personally, and so have my fellow council members who voted against, belittled by other members of council, specifically our mayor. And we have also been called out in the news as siding with conspiracy theorists. That is simply not factual. So I just want people to remember those things as we vote today. And thank you for your time and respect.
If there's no other comments, will the clerk please call the roll? The motion is to approve final reading.
Mr. Chapman?
Yes.
Mr. Chapman votes yes. Ms. Corley? No. Ms. Corley votes no. Ms. Hyatt?
Yes.
Ms. Hyatt votes yes. Ms. Landing?
No.
Ms. Landing votes no. Mr. O'Rourke?
No.
Mr. O'Rourke votes no. Mr. Rambo?
Yes.
Mr. Rambo votes yes. Mr. Santos?
No.
Mr. Santos votes no. Ms. Whitley?
Yes.
Ms. Whitley votes yes. Mayor Haney?
Yes.
Mayor Haney votes yes.
The chair rules it by a 5-4 vote. The ordinance passes.
Final reading, ordinance number 20058.
There being no further business, nothing on our agenda, this meeting is adjourned.